I've been informed we do have a quorum, so I am going to call to order the August 29th, 2012 meeting of the Board of Directors for the for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Could we get a roll call, please?
City of Carmel by the Sea, Councilmember Beach. City of Delray Oaks, Mayor Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Brown.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Ford.
Here.
City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge. Monterey County, Chair Potter.
Here.
Monterey County Supervisor Calcagno. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Camp.
Here.
City of Salinas, Mayor Donahue.
Here.
City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass.
Here.
City of Seaside, Mayor Bachhoffner.
Here.
City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Bloomer.
Here.
17 Congressional District, Alec Arago. 15 State Senate District, Crystal Clark. 27 State Assembly District, Nicole Charles. University of California, Graham Bice.
Here.
California State University, Justin Wellner.
Here.
Monterey Peninsula College, Dr. Garrison. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Dr. Shepard. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. United States Army, Colonel Clark. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Gail Youngblood. Marina Coast Water District, Ken Nishi. Chair Potter, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's time for 6:30. Okay. All right. First item of business is closed session. We are going into closed session under Government Code 54956.9. It concerns three cases involving Keep Fort Ord Wild against the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Case number M116438, M114961, and M19217. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on these items before we go into closed session? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the comment period. We'll adjourn to closed session. Just note that when we do come out of closed session, we will begin the balance of today's agenda prior to the public workshop, which will convene at 6:30. Thank you. Seats, I would appreciate it. We are out of closed session. The board heard three items relating to the Keep Fort Ord Wild and the Fort Ord Reuse Authority litigations. They heard presentations from the council, but no reportable action was taken. Direction was given. Moving on then to announcements. Retention. Yes. Go ahead.
The board retained Kennedy, Archer, and Harry as its counsel in a recently filed conflict case involving the consultant for the Reuse Authority reassessment plan.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Michael, any acknowledgments, announcements, or correspondences?
No, Chair.
All right. Then moving on, public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on a Fort Ord related item that is not on today's agenda. There's a 3-minute limitation on that testimony.
How's that? Okay. Yeah, Ron Cheshire with the Monterey Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades Council. We want FORA to know that we had a presentation here a couple weeks ago from a developer that has been selected for a project at Fort Ord. And I want to tell you that here was the gist of the pitch. I build houses in Roseville for $67 a square foot, and they only pay the guy $17 an hour there, and your costs are 3 times as much as that. So unless you guys drop your wages 35%, we can't go ahead and build. I will relate this to something else a little bit later today, but I want you to know I did a little research, and I have been in the business for over 35 years. There's a national home builder site. The average cost of a home in California to construct is $122. Now that means Needles to Eureka, Beverly Hills to Tahoe, whatever, average. When I paid for my permit in the county 2 years ago, and they still use this figure, they use $153 a square foot. I called several insurance companies. The local one in Monterey said $200 to $250 a square foot, and the one in Marina said $180 to $200. That's to build a home. Now, production homes in California, according to our pension people, if you want one in Antioch with not a lot of frills, $140 to $150 a square foot. This developer was concerned that the $128 a square foot it was going to cost him having to pay prevailing wages is too much. Well, he's getting a deal. And like I said, now I'll go ahead and sit down, and when you get into one of your business items, I think I'll relate this to you in regards to a little collusion going on in our community against all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Next speaker.
Yvonne Stone, FORA Environmental Justice Network. I wanted to comment on the fact that the comments that have been collected from the community people, or some of the community people, or a small portion, the way they're being collected. We are the FORA Environmental Justice Network. We've been here since day one, before day one. Our cause has been to serve and bring into the equation the people from our community who were impacted by this whole gigantic mess that has happened here, where people lost jobs and housing and ability to take care of their children. This plan was supposed to clean up Fort Ord in a hurry, Superfund, and then put everybody back to work. The people who lost jobs, all this was supposed to happen. But over the years, they found out that guesstimate of cost was not for real. And the millions of dollars that have been spent have not even touched the people who have been gravely impacted here. 20 years later, we're standing here in virtually the same situation. So our comments are very important, and they're not to be lumped in with the general public, because we're not the general public. We're the agency that has been in this process, representing the community, making comments that have gone into the administrative records, hundreds of comments, and then at every meeting. And now I suppose I'll have to write some comments to go into the documents for this new phase of this cleanup and reuse process. And I will be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak today?
My name's Ken Dursa, and I'm a resident and homeowner in Salinas. And I'd like to say, in terms of economic development, I suggest that FORA consider selling snake oil permits. What I'm seeing and reading in the newspaper, I was stationed out at Fort Ord in 1971 and trained in the area now that they're was posted as having explosives and this and that and the other, after some veterans went out and Fort Ord Wild went out and said that the area should be maintained in its natural state. In fact, and then FORA says that it has explosives there. Well, I trained there, went there again in 1995 as a student. All that area was always open, both as a GI and then to the public, and now they want to bulldoze it for whatever particular reason. The other thing I want to talk about is I'm glad to see the mayor of Salinas here, because as a homeowner in Salinas, I'm just getting hammered by falling property prices, home prices, and I'm seeing that 1,500 homes are being proposed to be built out here at what's called the Opportunity Center. I don't know who made up the charts, but when you start calling things the Opportunity Center, it's a little bit rhetorical in my mind. My home has gone down another 10% in the last year. So when they start talking about building 1,500 more homes, and when you've already got a flooded market, I wonder how that's going to work. And then I'd like to say, if you can't even pay the folks that for what's on the board a decent wage, then what's going to happen coming up? And as far as the hotel goes, the proposed Monterey Downs Hotel, that, if I'm not mistaken, that makes number 4 that are on the board for this area: Pacific Grove, Sand City, Delray Oaks, and now Monterey Downs. And if you've got occupancy problems in the existing hotels, then what the heck are you going to be doing flooding the market with all these other hotels? And if I read it right, you've got the La Playa paying $9 an hour, $1 over minimum wage, and with no bennies. So what kind of economic development is this? I mean, maybe what they ought to do is be taking those millions and spread them to the people that were displaced. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jan Schreiner, and I do want to say that man had some interesting thoughts, and I'd like for us all to just sort of imagine for a moment that housing development we can see so clearly next to the freeway, Seaside Highlands, is about 380 homes. And if we try to picture in our minds 3 times that number of homes in any one place, we could get almost one of the developments that Marina has approved. And that's about 1/5 of what's been approved. So try to imagine our coastline starting to look like LA, and then try to imagine something slightly newer, different, better. And that's where we want to go. And one of the things that's come to my mind, my attention, in the recent week, the U.S. Army visited the Marina City Council, talked about a prescribed burn, and made mention that there is approximately 90% of the world, the entire world's central maritime chaparral right here, right in this place we're talking about. So we have the power, or I should say, FORA perhaps, has the power to eliminate 90% of something in the world if they like, but wouldn't it be great to not only preserve that, but capitalize on that we have something that's important in the world right here because of our climate and our soil content. Something else that happened amazing here in 1776, Juan Bautista de Anza passed through this area with 200 colonists representing the King of Spain. And I always thought it was amazing because almost a little over half of those colonists were under the age of 18. So he was basically shepherding a bunch of kids and cattle through pretty unknown territory, through a lot of native people. He had to be an ambassador for his country as well as a babysitter and a leader and a military man. I mention him because there's a mission ride. You can find it at the website californiamissionride.org or thecaliforniamissionride.org. They're coming. They're going to be in Santa Cruz this weekend. They're going to be in Marina on September 6th. These people are commemorating that time period. They are reenacting a cavalry before the Fort Ord cavalry. They are coming through in a way to link the missions all the way from up north Santa Clara down to San Diego. They're going to be in Marina September 6th, and you're all invited to a barbecue to meet them and take a look at their website, and you can find other places where you can meet them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Are there others wishing to speak today? Okay, I see no one, so I'll close the public comment period. Brings us on then to the consent calendars. There are 2 board meeting minutes before us. Michael, did you want to note a slight amendment to the July 26th meeting?
Yes, Chair Potter, I think if you, all of the members of the board have before them, and some members of the public also have seen this, a very minor adjustment that adds 6 words to the motion that was made under old business under Master Resolution Settlement Agreement. And the language simply notes the fact that when the motion was made, the comment was included and understood that it was less the highest and lowest fee in the calculation. Jane Haynes pointed that out to us, and we've made the correction, and all parties should have it in front of them.
Okay.
Chair Potter?
Yes, Dave.
Thank you. If I could make a slight correction to the July 13th minutes. On the second page in item 5, where it says, Councilmember Brown stated that page 4 of item 5A, that's the minute approval, should be amended to include his no vote. I believe what I said was it should be amended to include my abstention because I had not appeared at that meeting.
Duly noted.
One more.
Felix?
On page 9 of 41 of our staff packet, page 2 of the 26 minutes, I actually had a good laugh. Passé unanimously. Just a typo. I think that needs to be passed unanimously.
Appreciate your scrutiny of the minutes. Jim?
Two things. One is I will be abstaining from both these items. And then I have a question through the chair to the attorney. Because one of the items I noticed on your July 13th item, if you go to page 4 of 41, you have 2 board members from the Marina Coast Water District identified there in the middle of the page. And then on page 6 of 41, you have a 3rd board member, which I believe is a quorum. And my question is this a Brown Act violation in your minutes here?
No. Do you want an explanation?
Please.
The Brown Act prohibits the actuality, not the record. I don't know what the I don't know what is the situation here. Can somebody explain to me? I didn't look at this before I got this question, but isn't the situation that that there were not actually that the people who are identified in this document were not actually present at the meeting? Is that the situation?
It looks like they had discussion in the meeting. If you go to page 4 of 41, the middle of the page.
Okay, where?
All right, well, there's absolutely no time sensitivity to the adoptions of minutes ever, in my mind. So if there's a question that needs some clarification, I'd suggest we trail this item to the next meeting, and you can confer with counsel
I need some time to look at this.
That would be good. So this is specific to the meetings of the minute of July 13th?
Yes.
Okay, unless there's any objections, we'll consider that item trailed to the subsequent meeting. Okay, see no objection to that. Is there anybody wanting to make modifications or additional modifications to the July 26th meeting? Is there anyone in the public wishing to speak to this item? Okay, why don't we bring it back for an attempt to adopt the July 26th minutes?
So moved with amendments.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. This brings us on to old business. This is the second vote on 2 items that failed to pass unanimously at the last meeting. Mr. Hulamard, would you lay out the process for this? Where is Jonathan? Steve?
I think Steve Ensley is prepared.
Chair, could I make a quick comment on this before we get into the actual meat of 8A and 8B? It's just a question as to form.
Well, I think Jonathan's going to lay out, or Steve is going to lay out the process, and then I'll go to you first of all, Felix. Stephen?
We can go through any questions that anybody has. I want to try and go through this as quickly as possible, given the time issues this evening. This is indeed a second vote on this item. Let's make sure we're on the same item. Capital Improvement Program Review Phase 2 Study, second vote. The motion is as described under the recommendation. and there were 8 votes in favor, 4 votes against. So by FORA rules on the first vote, it returns for a second vote. The question has been before the board and its various committees for the last 6 months or so, and a number of questions have come up over time and have been answered. So the entire series of packets are included in the staff report, so I'm not going to go through each of those questions, but obviously I can answer any further questions about them tonight. There were some new questions that were asked, and I want to point directly to them. There was a question regarding the definition of some wording under section 1.1, and the staff report reflects that. It has to do with what all available funds means and so on. And so we described the answer to that. And I guess in a nutshell, the answer to the question regarding how the process works is that it divides up all of FORA's mitigations on one side of the ledger, mitigations that come directly from the base reuse plan and which are paid for by the Community Facilities District, i.e. developer fees, and it ensures that all of those mitigations are paid before any money would go in any other direction. The second side of the ledger is what we sometimes call base-wide obligations. They could include building removal. They can include any number of other things that FORA does, including FORA's operations and indeed turning the lights on and so on. And those are paid for not by developer fees. In fact, they're not allowed to be paid for by developer fees. They're paid for by land sale revenues, by the rental income that comes in, and any property tax revenues, any other kinds of additional revenues, even the member dues. And what all available means is that all of the obligations that FORA has incurred over the years, and it includes in its capital improvement plan, would be covered before any dollars would be diverted back to the other side of the ledger to pay for, say, roads. So that would, a specific example would be that we have roughly $6 million in building removal still to be done, and let's say we only get $1 million in land sale revenues in a particular year, then we pay for the building removal that we can, recognizing that we still have $5 million left that we still have.
It's red. If that means anything.
Sorry about that. Get to pretend to be a board member for 10 minutes. So that's the answer to the main question that the board members had asked at the last meeting. And I can go into more detail about that if you want. The other area where there are new questions, you might call it, or questions that came up at the last board meeting are under Exhibit B to Item 8A. Looks like this, and it's toward the back of the packet. Questions 1 through 9, and most of those questions were answered in the board meeting itself, but we wrote them up again so that you would have them. We can go through them again if you want, but I think the answers are fairly specific. Then picking up at question number 7, a few that were not actually specifically answered in the meeting itself, but which we've written up with answers. So I'm going to just read what those questions were. Number 7, does the policy have the potential to lock us into the current FORA CIP, thereby tying the hands of the board? And the answer to that question is as described, and I can get into more detail if board members want me to. question 8, does the formulaic approach commit FORA funds up front, including fund balances, loan proceeds, and grant monies? The short answer to that is that no, it does not. There are two things going on here. What you're doing tonight is approving a mechanical process. The actual committing of funds, the board would continue to do during its budget, its various budget processes. So a vote tonight does not commit FORA funds up front. And then finally, by voting for this policy, can we look at fees and caretaker issues as needed, or are we saying that we were locked in for an indefinite period of time? And the answer to that question is that we're rolling this process out in a what you might call a stepwise way. The board has discretion about how it wants to go about doing that. There will be a phase 2 study coming back in a few months, and there will be a initial setting of the fees under this policy at some time in the future. At that point, the policy would be coming back every 2 years for new rates. So it's not going to fluctuate wildly every few months, but until you actually put it into place, you're going to have a certain amount of discretion. Now, ultimately, at least on the fee side, once you set your fee, then you are going to lock that fee in for a period of time. On the other side of the ledger, the base-wide obligation portion,
Could I raise a point of order here? Sorry to interrupt, Steve. But we have agendized for a time certain public workshop to begin at 6:30 p.m. The objections that some board members made the last time we considered this is that we were possibly rushing through. My question, as my point of order, is A, do we have to honor that time certain? I think we do. B, could we make a motion to continue this to the next meeting? I know that that the FORA document says that we are supposed to vote on this type of thing at the next meeting, but this is a special meeting. Does this give us any leeway? I'm going to anticipate that the vast majority of people here are here on item 9A, base reuse plan reassessment, and not on this issue.
And I'll second the motion to continue.
Staff, Michael? Mike, you need your mic on.
Yeah, this item was provided on the August 10th meeting that is scheduled for the next meeting of the board. It is simply a second vote on an item that's already been handled, and we've never had a situation where a second vote was continued, so that would be brand new to me. The item is one where the public hearing was already conducted. All of the items that Steve has indicated were already part of that public hearing, with the exceptions of the answers specifically provided to board members that were requested in the meeting. So as far as I know, there's no legal restriction, but it would be inconsistent with our past actions.
Jerry?
It's my understanding that the governor he has the bill before him to sign for the extension of FORA for 6 years, and I believe this is pretty important to go ahead and I hope approve, but have a second vote on so we can have this thing done before the governor makes his decision.
If so, could we perhaps at least continue this to after the public workshop that's scheduled for 3 minutes ago?
We can do that. We can do that if that's the will of the board. Jim?
May I just move approval of the item?
Well, wait, it would be a substitute motion. Then we have a motion to continue, I believe, on the floor. Was that a formal motion, Felix?
Yeah, and it sounds like the board wants to hear this tonight, and I'm okay with that. So my motion is to continue items 8A and B to after 9A.
We don't need a formal motion to do that. We can, by consensus, continue it after the hearing on the scoping. So we can proceed with the scoping at this time, which gets us rather promptly and almost on time to item number 9, which is the public workshop on the base reuse plan reassessment draft scoping report. This is entirely an informational item, so we'll take all public testimony. There'll be the usual 3-minute limitation, but please get your name on the record when you speak, and if you need supplemental information, if you want to provide a point of contact, email address, or anything else at that time, we do have a court recorder here that would be able to get that information down. There's always the opportunity to submit more written comments. Michael, do you want to speak briefly?
I wasn't recognized. I agree
I'm sorry, I couldn't see that far away.
That's all right. It is the second item. This has been vetted. For the sake of time, I think we need to take action on it because we need to respect time. Time certain is terrific, so let's certainly get about the business of getting to the public scope thing. But this continuous vetting, vetting, this is just simply a confirmation of what has been thoroughly vetted, and with all due respect, I think what is most appropriate for all parties concerned is just simply call for the question and let's move on.
Well, we seem to be regressing now.
Well,
if
we can get
if
it
it's the will of the
real
board,
quick.
I'm simply the chairman. I serve at the will of the board. So let's get this item out. I mean, if this is something you think you can move expeditiously, I do think the staff report went on abnormally long on something that is a second vote, and it was redundant because it was something we'd already done before.
And there's a substitute motion already.
All right.
Which I would second.
A substitute motion by Ford, seconded by Donahue. Okay. And
Can
as
we
I said-
clarify what the substitute motion is? Is it to continue hearing it, to approve it?
No, I believe the motion is to go ahead and have the second vote on the capital improvement program review. Am I correct? Yes. Okay, and the public hearing on that has been closed at the last meeting. So unless there's any other further discussion,
I do have.
Just
Thank you.
Director Parker.
I actually do have a question for Steve Ensley. On his presentation, he said all available revenue, and what I wanted to clarify was, do you mean all available revenue from developer fees? Because if so, we just need to put that in the language, and that would resolve, one serious question that I have that really hasn't been answered.
Maybe you could restate your question because I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
I think it'd be a questionable area to wander around and making changes to the textual matters that were before us before. I think that's the question. I think she wants a modification, and she's asking, can that be done? Am I right, Jane? I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I was trying to understand because you mentioned that all questions have been answered. Well, they haven't been answered to my satisfaction. I think there are real limitations that this language puts on FORA's ability to shift the CIP. It compromises our ability to budget for anything other than the CIP. We have changing circumstances with the base reuse plan. I just have a lot of concerns about this. And the other question that I have is, why are we in such a hurry? The legislature has passed the FORA extension bill. So any legislators who expressed concern about something to do with this issue.
Sorry, we have a point of order. Jim? And you were the maker of the motion? Yes. So it's within your prerogative then to call the question. That does, a call of the question, I believe, ends any discussion or debate.
It does if you says it. You say it does. You're the chair.
Well, I believe that you're expressing the same opinions you expressed at the last meeting.
Well, but here's my
Which
concern.
you
Why
may never
is it
agree
that
on.
we need to rush through this based on some argument about legislation in Sacramento?
But again, that was
doesn't
an
get
item
to
we
the
discussed
point
at the last meeting, so I'm going to side with the call of the question. We have a call of the question. All those, could we get a roll call on this, Lena?
City of Carmel by the Sea, Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
City of Delray Oaks, Mayor Edelin.
Aye.
City of Marina, Councilmember Brown.
No.
City of Marina, Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge. Monterey County, Chair Potter.
Aye.
Monterey County Supervisor Carcagno. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Camp. City of Salinas, Mayor Donahue.
Yes.
City of Sound City, Mayor Pendergrass.
Yes.
City of Seaside, Mayor Bachhoffner.
yes.
City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Bloomer.
Yes.
The motion passes.
10-2. Okay, That then moves us on to the ex officio representation issue. This is a second vote on this item. I don't believe it's necessary to have a staff report on this. Because there are absolutely no changes. Do we have a motion in one way or the other? Go.
Yeah, I move that we approve the proposal for the ex officio representation of the FORA Executive Committee.
We have a motion by Edlin, seconded by Parker. Okay. All right, can we get a roll call on this one, too?
On the motion, please.
I'm sorry, Felix, I forgot you wanted to speak on that.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that I think the process by which we just did the previous motion is abhorrent, and this is one of the reasons that FORA gets criticized. Many of you are surprised that I have been against this ex officio representation on the FORA Executive Committee, especially given that I'm a former academic and a professor, and generally am very much in support of CSUMB's activities. But I just didn't think it was good to have duplicate representation from underlying jurisdictions and an entity that is already represented by regular voting members on this board. But I've spoken with, and I had other concerns as well, I've spoken repeatedly with CSUMB on this issue. They promised again today that this is not an end run on trying to change the makeup of the full voting membership on the FORA board. So I'm going to change and subsequently now support this request for ex officio representation on the executive committee. However, I would like to state that I hope the board will pay close attention to the makeup of who exactly participates as ex officio on the executive committee. One of the reasons that I think this is a pretty good idea is that we can start getting diverse opinions and viewpoints on the executive committee. So I hope the board will pay attention and rotate the membership on an annualized basis, or at least every other year, as to which ex officio member wants to serve on the executive committee. So I hereby change my vote, and I will vote aye on this.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Could we get a roll call on this item also?
Councilmember Beach. Mayor Edelin.
Aye.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Selfridge. Chair Potter.
Aye.
Supervisor Calcagno. Yes. Supervisor Parker.
Yes.
Councilmember Camp.
Aye.
Mayor Donahue. Yes. Mayor Pendergrass.
Yes.
Mayor Brockhoffner.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bloomer.
Yes.
The vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, Jonathan, lead us on in the public workshop.
Is this mic's on? Okay, thank you. Just want to give a brief items on housekeeping on the workshop. Just want to point out the main focus of the meeting tonight is to take public comments on the draft scoping report. We're not providing a new presentation on the item. The presentation was provided at the August 10th FORA board meeting. And the draft scoping report became available on Wednesday, August 15th. It's online on the FORA website. It's at local libraries in the city of Monterey, city of Seaside, city of Marina, and I believe those are the three libraries. And then now CSUMB Library also has copies of the CDs. And then CDs are available at the FORA offices, at the FORA office, and we also have CDs tonight. So after I get done talking, if you raise your hand and you want a CD, we can hand those out to you. Wanted to point out also that there were a few comments inadvertently left out of the draft scoping report. Those are available on the FORA website. There were 10 comments in total. It's now a document on the website called Appendix D-2.1, and I'll just read off those comments since it's only 10 whose comments were left out. And we sent an email to the board members as well last Thursday, and then there were two other additional comments by Colin Gallagher that were found to be left out of the report. So those are now included on the website. The others that have their comments that were left out but are now on the website include Dennis Renault, Eileen Munger, James T. Hendrick, Laura McFarland, Margaret Larson, Mike Weaver, two comments from Mike Weaver, and then Susan Alexander. So those comments are now part of the scoping report. in the appendices, and if there's any other comments that were left out inadvertently, let us know tonight. We'll get those into the final scoping report, which will go to the board at the September 14th board meeting. We also encourage people tonight to submit comments in writing to FORA. So those forms of submitting comments, besides the comments you give tonight, would include emails. You can email FORA, plan@fora.org. You can send a fax to the FORA office. You can send mail to the FORA office, and then we also have comment forms that will be that are available tonight at the table. So I think that's primarily everything we wanted to say tonight. We do have a court reporter, so if you please identify yourself. That way, when your comments are included in the scoping report, there'll be a name to the comment. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, is there any questions of Jonathan by directors at this time? Okay, I'm going to open up for public comment. Could I see a show of hands of how many people are intending to testify? Okay, if as you come forward, if the speaker would go forward, identify themselves, and then the next speaker who's intending to speak could come up and take a seat in the front row somewhere. I think that might save a little travel time.
Begin?
You are on.
Okay, I'm Jane Haynes from the Sierra Club. We spent a lot of time on this. We have a 19-page letter that we're going to be emailing you this weekend that are comments on this, but don't worry. There's a cover page, and the cover page summarizes everything in our letter. We've read every one of the written comments. There are 317, and we found a real pattern in them. 178 of those say that they want no more development on the open space until the blight is removed. We found some really interesting things in the market study. The most interesting being that the market study recommends that the FORA board re-examine its policy of using land sales to raise money for the blight removal. All of that will be documented in our letter. We put the comments here on the first page, and then if you want to say look up the one about the land sales or whatever, you can just go through here, and then we put the page numbers where they are so that you can check it too. I want to say that we think that EMC did a wonderful job on the analysis, particularly of the status of the implementation. It's over 150 pages long. They went through every single policy and program in the base reuse plan. There are over 800 of those. They found 156 that have not been completed that need to be. It's not just FORA's fault. It's the jurisdictions haven't done it too. But they told how to get them completed, and one of the things Sierra Club is recommending is that your board hold a workshop to study that implementation status so that you can develop ways to make sure that all the things get done, and it tells you what needs to happen for all of these policies to be implemented, and that you then schedule a regular, at regular intervals, staff reports on the status of implementation so that it doesn't get this far behind. So anyway, that's there's a lot more. There are 19 pages more, 18 pages more. But you should get it sometime this weekend. We'll email it to you. And so that's kind of the highlights of what Sierra Club found anyway when we looked at it. By the way, there are almost 7,000 pages in this. And we've read thousands of the pages. We really have. We've read the entire market study, the entire scoping report, and about half of the appendices. So you'll get the email soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Next speaker.
Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom Moore with the Sierra Club. You've just heard a very brief summary of a number of the issues that we have covered, and just want to reiterate a couple of them and elaborate just slightly on one or two of them. There is very strong sentiment from the public to develop in the blighted paved areas first. I think you're going to hear that again on a number of occasions. I do hope you listen. That's pretty important. And EPS in the market study did indicate that the blighted areas are, to a certain extent, a barrier to bringing jobs and employers to the region because they drive into gateways like Imjin Parkway and see these old, deteriorating World War II era buildings that are still standing. We certainly would encourage you to talk with EPS, or if you're not happy with EPS, some other marketing and financial consultant to see about ways to finance blight removal that are different from the methods which for 14 to 16 years unfortunately haven't worked out. Thirdly, we do want to see a FORA-wide vigorous marketing plan developed. So that's work to be done, hopefully by FORA and FORA staff. The policies that haven't been implemented, perhaps that's a little bit of a fault of not really strong procedures for monitoring progress and for measuring progress forward. So I would certainly urge staff and the board to sit down and think about ways to come up with a really robust, periodically repeated process for monitoring the status of the reassessment, the reuse process going forward. There are folks, by the way, I would suggest you might look a little south to places like the Naval Postgraduate School, where there's an entire department called the Operations Research Department, full of professors who do that sort of thing for a living, in part, and know how to at least help you understand what's going on by coming up with appropriate metrics. I suspect they might have some interest in helping with a reassessment, with a monitoring of a process closing a major military base. The jobs housing balance issue we didn't feel was quite fully addressed in the reassessment report. Is that 3 seconds or 3 minutes?
About the same. 2:57, now 2:59.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll look forward to having you read our comments on the rest of the report. We'll give some time for the rest of the public.
Tom.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name's Susan Schiavone. I'm a Seaside resident. I've lived in Monterey County.
Can you pull the mic down? Thank you.
Thanks. My name's Susan Schiavone. I'm a Seaside resident, and I'm here because I read through the scoping report. I didn't read everything because I can't cover thousands of pages as a resident, but I was very concerned at the beginning of this process and wrote a letter before the deadline of June 10th about wildlife corridors. I don't see it in any of this. I see nothing. I've written a little thing to read, but I think it will take me more than 3 minutes. But this entire group needs to back up and start over because you did it backwards. We're forming plans to go into a habitat, make trails, use this. We're making buildings, but we're doing nothing to accommodate the existing wildlife that lives in this area so that they can have pathways into our world just like we have paths into theirs. And we're not setting it up so that they can come down to the beach, walk along the beach, and return on the south end of this whole property. All of the people who are making plans for city expansions, for building, need to get together and make little areas that connect so that the wildlife can move through this whole property around it and back to where they're going. I also see it trifurcated with 3 different roadways that are planned, including a Route 68 bypass, that's going to trifurcate all of these lands that we've set aside for wildlife. This is going to ensure a lot of death and destruction. Snakes are very, very sensitive to reverberating on the ground. We're not thinking about those little animals and people that live here and need to be accommodated as much as we are. So what I'm encouraging FORA to do is to go back, think about it, put in wildlife corridors all through what you're developing so that you can keep the jewel that you have here. You're going to talk about going on walks in the woods. What are you going to see if they're all dead? This is silly. You know, so go back and rework it correctly. You have time now to go back and do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Rick Fedek. I am not from the Sierra Club. I live in Salinas. Hi, Dennis. I want to talk to you guys about economic development. I understand that FORA was supposed to create jobs and supposed to create economic growth, and again, I think it was done backwards. Even when I read the market study and the scoping report right now, it looks like you guys first and foremost think about housing sprawl. That's not how you create new jobs. Temporary jobs building the houses, not long-term living wages for people who can buy those houses. Let's look at something else. Dave Potter, you grew up in New England, in Hingham. You remember Massachusetts when the mills closed down all across New England. And you remember that what was happening then and the way it is now. They've had a lot of economic growth. They've had economic growth because they figured out a model. They figured out where to build highways, where to build mass transit, how to move people from where they live to where their jobs are, and then the same engineers who moved there for those jobs later started businesses. It's predictable. It's a 5 to 7 year path from an engineer graduating from school, going to work for another firm, or the Navy, or a university, and then several years later starting a business. Today, we don't have the mass transit options for people to live down here and commute to San Jose. We don't have the mass transit, so they're not moving here. They're moving to Tracy. They're moving somewhere else where they can get to and from and sit there all day on their laptops or during the commute, or take naps during the commute. And they're starting the businesses out in Tracy, not here. So people would be starting more startups, software startups here, if we brought them in before they got married or when they were for young couples, let them buy their first homes here. So we need homes that cost $160,000, $200,000, not $1 million homes. We don't get software executives to move here, then they bring their companies. That model does not work. You get young engineers to come here as young couples. They start having kids here. They start their businesses here. And we've been down this process for 15 years. If the model we've been using for 15 years has not worked, let's pick a model that's worked in other parts of the country. It's worked in Alabama. It's worked in Florida along the Space Coast. It's worked in New York. It's working right now in Rockland County, which also had a very high unemployment problem, a lot of empty buildings. Now they have buses and trains. It's a 1 hour, 1.5 hour commute to New York City. People first started commuting. Now they're starting businesses in clusters around where the train stations and bus stations are, because they were cheap spaces for people to rent to set up their businesses. And the same barracks that we talk about as being blighted locations, we could throw on a coat of paint or put up some cinder block buildings, cheap rent offices, and a few years later, okay, 2 seconds left? 3 seconds.
No seconds.
Sorry?
No seconds.
There we go. Done. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rick. I appreciate it. Thanks, Speaker.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Walling. I am a resident of Seaside and a student at CSUMB. I just transferred there. I'm new to the area. We've only been living here for a year, and I've been doing my best to learn about the issues that are going to affect me as a resident. And I admit I don't know much yet because I'm young and I'm new. So admitting that my sympathies are largely with Keep Fort Ord Wild and the environmentalists in the community, I have 4 questions that I'd like to ask that I have not yet heard really good answers to. The first one, why have FORA and the City of Seaside retained the same outside consulting company to reassess the use of the Parker Flats cutoff? Isn't it a conflict of interest? The second question, how does the City of Seaside and the county as a whole plan to allocate water to any new developments, given the upcoming shortages that I've heard forecast all over the place? The third, what is the evidence of need or desire not only for new single-family homes in a soft housing market, but also for a racetrack, a casino, hotels, Olympic swimming pools, all the stuff that's supposed to be going along with Monterey Downs? What is the evidence that this community is going to use that? I lived in Annapolis for a number of years while I was attending school out there, and shortly prior to the collapse of the housing market, they put up a whole bunch of luxury condominiums on the theory that Washington lawyers were going to commute out there for their yachts and were going to buy these $500,000 or $1 million condominiums. Well, they didn't. And the city is out millions of dollars for these luxury developments that no one is buying. What are you going to do if nobody wants these houses you're going to build? And the fourth question, which everybody else has already addressed, is why is the blight not being removed? Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before the next speaker speaks, I've been informed we have some sort of technical glitch and we need to shut down the system for 15 seconds. So, issues beyond my control. So, if we could just hold a minute. You good? Okay, that... and staying right on time, that was all the time that was needed. So, next speaker.
Levon Stone again, Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network. I'm going back to 1990 when the base was put on the base closure list as the one of the most contaminated sites in the nation. I'm going back to when the base closed down and we had hundreds of people who lost their jobs, hundreds of people who were dislocated here, and was promised that this Superfund process was going to make it possible for us to hurry up and clean it up and get people back to work in their communities, get their communities back together. Well, that didn't happen. And most of them was dislocated because they couldn't keep their houses. They had to sell their houses for pennies. They had to get out the area, and a lot of those families were African-American families. They have virtually been put out of the area and been replaced. Now, until this matter is addressed, it's not going to go away. It's not going anywhere, because I was one of those people, and I helped to close down this base, moving from department to department, and was left hanging here without a job when all the jobs moved to other places in the country. Now, if this process is not going to deal with that, what CERCLA has implied should happen, according to the CERCLA laws, the Superfund laws, the environmental justice resolution that was written by President Clinton to protect us from encroachment, because it was going to happen because all this free land was happening. Now, I have not seen a lot of people that was part of this process when we got started, when we did all the leg work, all the grunt work, all the little dirty work of bringing these things to the forefront that nobody wanted to hear about. Well, I'm still bringing them out, and they must be addressed. There is no way that we can be a model for a country, for a nation, when we treat our people as though they are not important, that they're less important than a snail or something like that. These are human beings. We're talking about people with families, with babies, with children, people who have dreams, people who need to live in their country and in their communities and be safe health-wise, economic-wise, and any other wise. And I advocate for these people and have been doing it for all of these years. And I do it all over the country.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Alexander. Pardon me. Alexander Henson. I'm an attorney for Veterans Wild Fort Ord, which has challenged the public access restrictions on areas of Fort Ord never used for munitions and awaiting DTST review and approval. After that approval, EPA has final review and approval to release the land from most of the deed restrictions regarding cleanup of this toxic Superfund site. There is a FORA map which indicates most of the remediation has been completed and submitted for review by DTST. The only exception is the area encompassed by the Monterey Downs project. That area is designated as having active remediation. FORA's response to a request for greater access to safe areas by my client is to inform DSTS and EPA of trespassing issues in areas dangerous to personal safety from unexploded ordnance. This information then triggers a letter from DSTS demanding that FORA take corrective action to preclude personal intrusions into unsafe areas of unexploded ordnance. FORA, or someone, causes a FORA contractor to put up no trespassing signs in various areas surrounding the Monterey Downs project. Given that the policy direction was to post a sign at each recognizable trail next to the permitted access roadways, along some areas the signs are as thick as a picket fence. Such a maze of recognizable trails without any loss of life or limb confirms these areas have already been cleared of all surface munitions. FORA grants right of entry permits to many special interest groups over these same trails where the no trespassing signs are located. It is FORA policy to grant such ROE permits to groups who have liability insurance against mishaps not having to do with munitions. Insurance companies do not sell that type of insurance. If public land should be available for public use unless it is unsafe for use, then why are these lands already heavily used as evidenced by the trails and ROE permits off limits to the general public? Who adopted this policy of excluding the public from lands that have been cleared of munitions unless they have an ROE permit? If the property has been cleared and certified, what is the justification for withholding public access? Thank you.
Thank you, Zan. And if we could refrain from clapping if you feel good, thumbs up. If you feel bad, thumbs down. Thanks.
You did that just before I showed up.
wait. There'll be no actions. Thank you, Ed.
I'm retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Ed Mitchell, who underwent basic training and 1 tour of duty at Fort Ord, and I'm submitting this third set of inputs as a member of American Legion 593 and as the co-founder of the Prunedale Neighbors Group. The reassessment confirmed that much progress has been accomplished by establishing CUSMB and entitling 6 subdivisions, some of which have been partially built. However, the FORA reassessment did not adequately address that there is a low-cost way of rapidly stimulating lucrative athletic events and ecotourism for the cities surrounding the National Soldiers Monument, and that little progress has been accomplished in 14 years in establishing an intelligent county and city trail system with parking, easy access to, through, and around the protected interior area of Fort Ord, which is an objective of FORA. Imagine 3, 4, or 5 events a year as large as the Big Sur Marathon, but staged across and around the Soldiers Monument. For example, a running and biking biathlon, bringing TV crews to film the thousands of athletes racing through the beautiful interior of Fort Ord and biking on the roads around the monument to end just across the street at the old Soldiers Parade Ground. Now also imagine the restaurant, hotel, and gas station owners of the utility end of our hospitality industry counting their profits from the thousands of guests that stayed in Salinas, Marina, Seaside, Delray, Oaks, and Monterey. But such economic benefit will only happen if FORA grasps the vision that MORCA, 4U, Keep Fort Ord Wild, and 18,000 signers of the recent referendum understand. Free and easy access to the National Monument can provide a huge economic impact to the local economy at a very low cost if they have free access to these areas. Just as free access by the Coastal Act has done for this county, allowing people for 42 years to get free access to the coastal areas. It's the same economic approach. So it is not in the surrounding cities' best economic interest to approve subdivisions or roadways which block access to the monument. And FORA can and should design and establish parking areas, access routes, and an intelligent trail network that supports those types of events. It can be done in 15 months, and it can be done cheaply. For example, hire David Lutz, who just retired from the Monterey County Planning Department and Parks Department. Don't do government management, do program management of this federal program. Establish a date when he will report back to you, and I think you'll see quite a bit of benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Henrietta Stern. I'm speaking as an individual. I'm a resident of Pacific Grove, but I'm also very involved with MORCA, Monterey Off-Road Cycling Association, as well as Fort Friends, Fort Ord Recreation Trails Friends. And this is a wonderful entree that the previous speaker I identified, because we really believe in win-win solutions, and we really encourage you to think about win-win solutions, where a wonderful network of trails, bike paths, whether they're paved bike paths or dirt trails, can really be an economic boon. It can be raise property values for nearby homes. It can create job opportunities, such as was just suggested by the previous speaker. It can provide tax revenue for you. Also, another speaker who was talking about these high-tech people who can really live wherever they want. They can do their work from their laptops, to have a wonderful area where people would like to relocate themselves or their businesses, because they don't have to be in a specific building in San Jose. They can do their work here. So I really encourage you to think about the economic benefit of trails and open space, and that is not mutually exclusive with jobs. In fact, many studies have shown that an entity like the Fort Ord National Monument and an integrated trail system with it benefits communities, and especially communities like Seaside or Marina or Salinas that are immediately bordering the National Monument, and the lands that you control have a wonderful opportunity to really do something great for your communities, as well as the visitors and the type of jobs that are associated with eco-recreation. In terms of the near term, the immediate near term, I really would like you to think about putting on hold some of the munitions cleanup for areas that are slated as residential, because that means taking the trees right down to the root ball. And instead, I know you need to continue your cleanup, but clean it to the open space standard, which means leaving the trees and allowing the chaparral brush to grow back, similar to what you did at the Oak Oval area and the Parker Flats area. If indeed there isn't going to be necessarily that residential development, and perhaps something more like a beautiful campground amongst all the trees where people enjoy the trees in the open space, rather than yet another subdivision or commercial area that your economic report says may not be viable, it wouldn't be appropriate. It would be a lose-lose situation if you took those trees down to the nub now, thinking that they might be residential, and indeed if they turn out not to be residential, then you've lost those trees forever. So I really encourage you to think about that. There was a wonderful gentleman who I met at our last workshop here, a gentleman from Seaside, and he said, it's fine to keep Fort Ord wild, but don't keep Seaside poor. And I really got me thinking. And I really believe that trails and open space and job creation for communities such as Seaside can work together. It's not mutually exclusive, and I really encourage you to work with the community and the passion of so many people here who care deeply about these. Rather than working against and being in litigation, let's work together and create something really positive. Thank you,
Henrietta. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Ralph Rubio, a lifelong resident of Seaside and participant in this discussion for many years. There's no way in the world that I would advocate encroaching on the open space, the national monument, and the recreational uses on the former Fort Ord. Over 20,000 acres are dedicated to that, and I applaud that, and I think that we should get busy and build those trails. And all these groups that are here speaking about those trails should be at the spearhead of building those trails and designing, the facilities out there on those 20,000+ acres. The thing I'm here to speak about is the small portion that is set aside for economic development. Do not encroach on that. That is the livelihood of the communities here. We talk about the former Fort Ord, which is in reality Seaside Marina, the county, Monterey, Delray Oaks. CSUMB. Sovereign jurisdictions that should be able to keep their own self-determination as to how they want to fulfill their general plans or not, and in what order. If a community decides they want to take out the inner blight first, good for them. If they don't and some other project comes up first, they should be able to do that. But they will not encroach on that protected lands. All they are doing is fulfilling the promise and the covenant that was made with this community so many years ago. And please don't go back on that promise, and make sure that the people that Levon represent and these cities represent get what they deserve, what they were promised, and what they've been looking forward to. That the generations moving forward will know that there is possibilities in the future, that we can create new opportunity for our folks. To back up now and clamp it down because we got a bad economy is not forward thinking. That's turtle thinking, pulling in and just shelling up. And that's not what we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Next speaker.
My name is Greg Nakanishi. I'm a citizen of the Monterey Peninsula for practically all my life. Excuse me. One of the things that I noticed in the base reuse plan meetings that we had earlier was that when Fort Ord was in existence, there were about 20,000 jobs that were created as a direct result of the base. And since that time, only about 5,000 of those jobs have been recreated in the community as a part of the redevelopment of Fort Ord. The other thing that I noticed and heard in some of the discussions was that a lot of people wanted a regional approach to developing the former Fort Ord, so that it wasn't just Delray Oaks or the city of Marina or the city of Seaside going about their own business. And the things that I guess I took from it were, one, I think that we really need to get back to job creation in this community, looking at an economic base that is sustainable over a long period of time. And no criticism, I've never seen a trail or horse trail or open space create tax revenue. I don't see those as creating high-paying jobs in this community for people that can afford the high-priced housing that we have in this area. So I really would encourage you to take a look at the base reuse plan as an opportunity to look at our history. You know, we came from a fishing history. We became a military community. And I think our opportunity now is to really envision what kind of community and what kind of economic base do we want to have as we go forward. And as part of that, I also have been involved in creation of this veteran cemetery on the former Fort Ord. And I would really encourage you, having worked with these veterans for the last 5 years, and they've been working for the last 19 years on this project, to keep the focus on the cemetery where it is, so that we're not waiting another 20 years to have a veteran cemetery built for the people who have lived and served our country. I think it's a travesty that we're even talking about changing the location of the cemetery when it's taken 19 years to get us where we are today. These veterans deserve an honorable resting place. And I think it's your responsibility as well as ours to let them have that honor.
Thank you, Craig. Next speaker.
Hi there. My name's Colin Gallagher. I'm a resident of the city of Marina. And first, want to say thank you all for what you're doing. And there's a huge amount of local talent here that I see in front of me. So you're all public servants from a diverse range of entities. Hi, Councilmember Ford and Board Member Ford here today. Hi, Colin Gallagher, City of Marina resident. Anyway, thank you all for what you're doing here. And so FORA has kind of a unique legal status. It has an agreement with the military. It has a special status that allows it to request certain types of documents and plans and to execute certain types of activities that other entities and local authorities cannot. There is a pending, sitting on the governor's desk, AB 1614 thing that probably will be signed pretty soon. I wanted to make a comment here about that. that although it's been approved by the legislature and will likely be approved by the governor, I've registered with the governor my objection to it because I feel that that state law should have included some kind of provision for further review in the form of basically a citizens review committee, and it didn't. And to me, that's was kind of strange that the extension bill of the legislature only provided for extension of FORA, but didn't really stipulate any accommodations or changes in the interest of the general public that would further the progress of public engagement, or in the interest of further public review or direct public engagement with FORA. There have been a lot of public inquiries, lawsuits, concerns over public information, and to me, it's something that FORA should take up on its own initiative to try to get a citizens review committee and to try to get different citizens and residents more directly connected and engaged with the FORA board, as this seems to have been. There have been different obstacles to this, and I think that would that would be a good thing, and it would help overcome some of the problems that you have had with the general public when it comes to what kind of activities the FORA board does or how it's perceived when you engage in the type of actions that you're engaged with, ranging from actions on infrastructure to interactions with developers or what kind of information you disseminate to the public or don't disseminate to the public. So I want to add that as you move forward, I feel that a citizens review committee would be a very good thing for either the legislature to take up or for FORA to take up, or both of you together to try to work towards with the public in general. And that being said, I think the reassessment is a good thing to open up and redo some of the policies, but work with businesses, work with the general public as much as humanly possible.
Thank you, Tom.
And that's
I
all.
appreciate
Colin
it.
Gallagher.
Colin, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Janet Parks, and I live in Pacific Grove, and I'm president of the Central Coast State Veterans Cemetery Foundation. For the past 14 years, we have been working hard to get a veterans cemetery here at Fort Ord, and over 20 years ago, veterans came to the city of Seaside, the county of Monterey, and FORA and said, we need land for a cemetery. And FORA found a place for us, and they all agreed that the spot that was designated for the Veterans Cemetery was where it's presently located at the end of Parker Flats Road. Now all of a sudden it's become a very big problem with people who think they need trails and they don't want to cut the trees down. Well, I say, do you want to honor a veteran or do you want to honor a tree? You have to make the decision. But I hope that the Board of Supervisors and that FORA board will decide that the Veterans Cemetery will stay where it has been designated so that we continue to work hard to get the cemetery actually going. And thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Janet. Next speaker.
My name is Jack Stewart. I'm a resident of Marina. In my former life, I was a retired soldier. I am a retired soldier who served at Fort Ord in basic training and was fortunate enough to come back here to retire. I worked for the county for 20 years as the Military and Veterans Affairs Officer. I was tasked in 1994 by the board to get the cemetery done. I failed, but I never gave up. Many, many times we've gone through systems trying to get the cemetery in place. Through the National Cemetery System, denied 3 times. Twice more as annexed to another cemetery, we were denied. The only solution was a state veterans cemetery. It took us 5 state bills to get one signed off by the governor. and it was dependent upon local funds to pay for the cost of maintenance and administration of the cemetery to effect an application for the State Veteran Cemetery project. The site was selected way back in 1996, having been denied 4 other sites that we wanted that now are considered, maybe they're not so bad after all. But regardless of what happens, we've been through this process. FORA has spent over $700,000 on this project already. Let me give you some numbers here. We got over 30,000 veterans that live in the borders, within the borders of the county of Monterey. Each veteran has 1.56 dependents. All that equates to 109,000 residents of the county of Monterey. 75% of veterans vote. Did you hear me? Yes, we do. Thank you. Largest population base, they vote because they have fought for their freedoms, given you your freedoms from the date our country was founded. This cemetery is so close to happening, it's dependent upon a sale of a parcel of land. Don't let that stand in your way. We must get this cemetery done. I want to be buried there. When I retired, I had black hair and a little bit on the top. I've got nothing else to give. I've given this my whole life, basically since I retired. I'm not giving up, but I'm getting long in tooth. And my memory's not what it used to be. In fact, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. But I know one thing. Let us enshrine our veterans at the former Fort Ord. If you've looked at the site, if you've looked at the plan, it is a mecca. It would provide thousands of jobs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack. Nice. Next speaker.
My name is James Bogan. I'm a resident of the Seaside. I won't repeat what Jack just said, but I'll say this to all you elected officials. If it wasn't for veterans, do you think you would be elected to that position you have now as a United States citizen? We have put our lives on the limb. We did our time. And some of us suffer every day from the aches and pains to give you the opportunity to sit here and squabble back and forth. I challenge each one of you to walk in my shoes every day with the pain I have fighting for veterans. Look yourself in the mirror, and if you see a veteran, you know that you are enjoying the freedom because of us. In January 1st, 1972, the military went all volunteer. We called it VOLA back then. It's a changed military. And these kids are still putting their lives on the limb for you. Politicians, citizens of this area, think about what you're doing to veterans. When you go home, if you don't pray, ask the devil to help you out.
Thank you, James. Next speaker.
My name is Sid Williams. I'm a resident of Marina. I would just challenge the FORA board to remember why FORA was created. FORA was created to provide regional oversight and a regional approach to the redevelopment of Fort Ord to replace the economic engine that left when the fort closed. Not to provide trails, not to provide horse stuff, but to provide for the economic redevelopment of Fort Ord. A previous speaker already mentioned that of the 20,000 or 25,000 civilian jobs that were out there at Fort Ord, only 5 have been replaced. That's a lot of money that still is not coming into your cities, to your county, to do what you need to do with tax revenue to provide the services that you're supposed to provide. On the other side of that coin, the veterans in this county provided the services they were supposed to provide. And now it's up to you to make sure that cemetery happens so they have a place to rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Carruthers. I am the chairman of the Salinas Citizens for True E-Migration Reform. I count about 22 people here around this desk, and I invite you to think for a moment about the history of this county's efforts to address the water supply issues on the Monterey Peninsula, and to build some kind of sources or whatever to provide the necessary water to meet the requirements of the meeting the 2016 deadline for this county. Having watched the progress and the lack of progress, the incredible lack of progress on addressing this issue, I want to see a show of hands among the 22 people standing in front of me here who actually think that this county is going to produce any kind of organization, system, process, engineering possibility, pulling in water from in plastic envelopes from the Yukon, whatever. You know? Tell me, how many of you think we will meet that deadline with the kind of incompetence, corruption, mismanagement, and general I want to be God of this thing attitudes that we've seen here? I want to see a show of hands. How many of you think?
Bill, this is public comment, not an opinion poll. So
It's not on my, okay. Then
summarize
I'll
your
drop
comments.
That. You were at the same meeting that I was, that the Green Party owner, Mr. Del Pietro, was there as well. Mr. Tom Moore made the prediction that he does not believe that we will meet that deadline. We have water rights available from the city of, from Pebble Beach that might be lent or loaned, and we have water rights available from the Fort Ord area. We desperately need those, and until we see some kind of progress on the really major issue of the economic issue of this county and its coastal area, I would suggest that these predictions of, well, we better make jobs, whatever that is, be put quietly to rest until we have the water there to do it. I want to remind each of you, while you're sitting here listening to people talk about government making jobs, what a real job is. A job consists of either producing a service or producing a product that the world is willing to pay you for. And governments cannot do that very well. Only individual businesses and individual people do that.
Thank you, Bill.
High-paying jobs are high-paying moon things.
Thank you.
I conclude my remarks. I'd love to see an actual show of hands, though.
Next speaker, please.
I'm Steve Eklund. I live in Salinas. I've been here before. And I really think we should keep Fort Ord as wild as we possibly can. I understand the desire for a veteran cemetery, but I don't see why it has to be put in a place where we have to destroy thousands of trees to put in the cemetery. There are other places the cemetery could be put. What Bill was saying, I read the other day that somebody wants to put they've already, in Monterey County, there are over 1,000 houses already in foreclosure. There's already been approved something like 5,000 more houses ready to be built. So why do you want to cut down trees to put in more houses when nobody will be able to buy them? I'm almost ready to, if it wasn't for to destroy the environment, I'd say go ahead and do it, and those developers would probably build up a whole bunch of houses and not be able to sell them, and they'd be out a whole bunch of money. Again, I believe, and I can't say this as an absolute fact, but I believe most of the people who want to develop Fort Ord and make the money out of it are not from around here. They don't care about the environment around here, and we have some of the cleanest air in the country around here. We have a wonderful environment. Fort Ord could be a wonderful tourist attraction with a beautiful mountain biking trails, horseback riding trails. We could bring people from all over the place to come here for eco recreation. So please do everything you possibly can to not develop the areas that are so precious. They're so wonderful. We have this wonderful environment around here. Let's keep it. We don't want to destroy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve, would you repeat your last name?
Eklund.
Thank you, FORA Board. I'm Nancy Amadeo. I'm from the city of Marina. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I've heard a lot this evening. We want open space. We have open space. We want areas to develop. There's about 3,500 acres that are available to develop on the former Fort Ord according to the original plan. I don't think that's changing. We lost an entire city when Fort Ord closed. If everyone in Monterey packed up their bags and walked out, it would have a huge impact on the region. And that's what the closure of Fort Ord did. It had a huge impact on the region, and the communities most hard hit were the cities of Marina and Seaside. I believe in open space. I'm thrilled we have a national monument. I certainly am in favor of access, but access doesn't have to preclude development. The other thing that I believe in, and this really hits home for me, is that we need to keep the veteran cemetery where it's at. I've worked many years to provide a final resting place for the men and women who have come through the former Fort Ord, and they deserve a place for their final rest. I recently took a trip back east just about 2 weeks ago. I visited Arlington. I visited the memorials in New York. I visited where our country got its foundings in Philadelphia. I went to Gettysburg, where over 20,000 people died in 3 days. And I went to the Flight 93 Memorial, where approximately 44 people gave up their lives willingly for our country. There are memorials for them. We need to have a memorial here, and believe me, people will come, not just to be buried, but to witness the fact of sacrifice and patriotism that all of our cemeteries for veterans provide, a constant reminder to the sacrifice that these few have made. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next speaker.
Good evening, FORA Board. Jay Fagan, my very first time speaking in front of you. I'm quite excited. I hope I get a pin. So I'm here this evening because I'm hearing a lot of people throughout the community tell me we need to stop cutting down trees. Well, let me tell you about myself. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a citizen of Marina. I'm a homeowner. I'm a business owner. Last year alone, I probably directly put in the economy about $100,000. I pay approximately 40% of my gross income in taxes, all in, state, local, property, you name it. My wife was a graduate of CSUMB. That cost us $50,000. In short, we've bought. What happens in Monterey County, we've paid for. We're one of many. I'm not saying I'm 1%, probably in the top 10%, but we've paid for it. And it reminded me that I was at the airport the other day, and before I got on the plane, she asked me how much I weighed, and I wanted to know why. And she said, well, so we know how much fuel to put on the plane. I said, fill it up. I'll buy, fill it up. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've bought. I want development. I paid for it, make it so. I want to golf 19 or 18 holes, 19 at the bar at Pebble Beach, and I want to go over and have lunch and watch the ponies at Monterey Downs. I want to finish the evening off in Carmel and watch a race out at Laguna Seca. That is the Monterey Peninsula to me. I've paid for it. I want it to happen. Cut the trees. We've got 20-plus thousand acres of trees. They're marvelous. They're wonderful. It's wonderful to have ecotourists. When I was a kid, apparently I was one. We got our horses. We got our tents. We went to the state parks. We paid our $10 at the gate. It was probably 50 cents then. But, we paid that. We camped. We trucked everything in. We trucked everything out. Apparently, I was an ecotourist. I always thought we were poor, but I guess that's the way ecotourism works. So we've done well by the economy, by the environment. I love living in Monterey Bay. It's beautiful. You've done a phenomenal job. Do not take an acre of developable land away from us. We've paid for it. We deserve it. let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Come anytime.
My name is Kay Klein, and I'm a resident of Seaside. First of all, thank you for the scoping report. There were many interesting things in that report. I was especially heartened to see that the National Monument was recognized in that report, and also that when it was signed in 1994, there were four goals, and two of them, one of them is the reuse and development of the base area. It needs to be done in ways that enhance the economy and the quality of life of the Monterey Bay community. And the fourth one was to maintain and protect the unique environmental resources of the area. So I was really glad to read that, and I think that it's really important that many things in that scoping report be looked at, especially also there was a comment in there, the removal of derelict Army buildings needs to be prioritized to provide a better vision of future economic opportunity. And I think that this is what many of us are calling for. We would like to see the derelict areas developed. And we'd like to see also a focus put on entry to the National Monument from Seaside and Marina. This is part of dealing with the people of the areas and allowing them easy access. The health department now has a 5-year grant in Seaside, and they're working on nutrition and exercise and getting people out into the park areas. And as you know, Seaside has very little parkland within Seaside proper. So I think that looking at the fact that things have changed, we have a national monument now, and that access is going to be really, really important. Just as the veterans are very passionate about having a cemetery, and I really applaud that and think that they also deserve that, I think that we residents who value having an easy access to the National Monument and encouraging all the different things that will happen there. Some of us are working on Friends of the National Monument to help with the trails and all of this. There's a lot of economic things that can happen now that we have a national monument in our midst. And we have the De Anza Trail, we have a lot of history. All of this is important to protect and also to have our development. Also, it was saying that in your scoping report, more emphasis should be placed on multicultural and underserved population. That issue of inclusion is really important, and I think we need to look at how we can make sure that happens as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Howdy. My name is John Tompkinson. I'm past 28 District Commander of the American Legion, member of the United Veterans Council, and a few other things. But what I'm going to do for a moment here is just give you a little bit of history on myself. Both great-great-grandparents fought with Washington in the American Revolution. I hope no one in this room had to go through what I went through in 1966 in Vietnam. I deal with a lot of veterans, and have for many, many years, who have to go a long distance for the cemetery. We all know that story. When I was a young boy, I can remember taking my thumb and planting blue spruce in the ground and put the seedling in. It meant so much to me that to this day I can promise you I've never even pruned a tree without apologizing to that tree. To some people that may sound silly. To me it doesn't. It's a living thing. Everything is a trade-off. Everyone in this room right now, all of us have different points of view. We have to come together. And we're going to have to give. And then we're to make this work from what I've been seeing here over the last year. So it's my wish, my heartfelt wish. I'm at a point where I'm a blood and guts carpenter. I work every day. I'm almost 70 years old. I still swing a hammer every day. Work has been really, really tough in this area. So I'm not going to go into all that. We know we need jobs. We know we need development. We also know, and I have hiked this area as a young man, and right up to this age, I love the wild. But somewhere along the way, if I had to cut one of those blue spruce down, I would do it in a moment to honor our veterans and to make something work. That right now, I can see the writing's on the wall. We're all going to have to come together very quickly, because by the accounts in the paper, things are happening very quickly. So it's my wish that we just give a little and take a little. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, John. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Ellen Gannon. I'm a 27-year resident of the Monterey Peninsula in Carmel. Pro-development can be an integral solution that supports human needs from the roots up. Ancient trees are key since they have deep roots that can survive our only seasonal rainfall without tapping into man-made watering systems built on our non-existent new water supply. Fort Ord's live oak groves are part of an ecological network from Big Sur to Santa Cruz to Carmel Valley to Salinas and beyond. These trees are by their nature CO2-eating beings. Monterey Peninsula attracts residents and tourists by its innate and natural beauty, which perpetuates the fresh, clean air benefiting human, animal, plant. Within Monterey cities, Seaside has the lowest amount of parkland, Marina second, Salinas third. I urge you, FORA, to preserve the mature oaks in Fort Ord by building on the blighted and bulldozed areas and by building community in the building process. Gratitude. Very sincerely, Ellen Gannon.
Thank you, Ellen. Next speaker.
Thank you for having us. I'm Jason Campbell, resident of Seaside. I admit I didn't read the entire... I'm Jason Campbell, resident of Seaside. I admit I didn't read the entire draft. It's 1,000 pages, sounds like a lot, and I don't think the Sierra Club should apologize for returning 19 pages. That doesn't seem like a big deal. I think I'm glad that for relatively small investments, we can do what a lot of people have said here. We can go with our strengths, with the beauty and what we have, the National Monument, and I think the base reuse plan should actually take into account the National Monument. I know we all want jobs, very good paying jobs, but what I haven't heard yet is what those jobs are. I agree that leading a bicycle tour may not be a high-paying job, but at least it's a job, and we don't have to invest tremendous amounts of money and land to produce jobs like that. I'm open to hearing what these good jobs are. I really am. I think so far the best jobs have been what's been created with the schools and the education system, and we should really keep building on that since that's what's working. The market research seemed to take note of our current economic conditions. It's a little more realistic than the original plan. And I think you guys, it's a little bit disappointing at your failure to adapt to the new economics. But I think if you did, we would be much better off. We'd be saving money. We wouldn't be talking about shrinking developers' fees all the time. And on that note, I got to say, if the developers can't afford to pay the fees, maybe it's a bad investment. There's a bit of capitalism running through me. I'm still a capitalist on some level, and I think we should treat the developers like capitalists and not support them by reducing their fees, providing them the infrastructure. Let them build that if that's what it comes down to. Anyway, I think there's a new emphasis on a long range, like this is a 30 or 40 year plan now, that the build-out plan. I hadn't heard that before, except it's starting to come up with this reassessment, almost as though history will be the judge if we made the right decisions. Well, I think that's a bad excuse. I think we need to make the right decisions here and now.
We've heard a lot of good ideas from people in the audience, and sometimes I think we should switch places. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Next speaker.
Paul, can you hear me? Paul Wolf, Seaside resident. I am going to run the risk of oversimplification, but there's so much to think about. And what occurs to me is a concept, a bit of a false dilemma, perhaps, but I do want to kind of divide it in two. On one hand, you have sort of the vision, the 90s vision with a booming housing market, an amazingly optimistic student enrollment projection for CSUMB, and many things that do not fit the current vision on the other side, which is a slumping housing market, really fractional enrollment at CSUMB, the concept that we are not going to be the dot-com extension of Silicon Valley. We now have a monument. So we are looking at a different world. And when the planner of EMC says we have a choice between a little tweak and a big tweak, are they prescribing, maybe more than they should, something that doesn't take into account the difference between then and now? The other thing that I'm, again, at the risk of a false dilemma, but there is on one side the concept of jobs that are based upon the beauty and splendor of this area, and on the other hand, again, maybe an oversimplification, the massive Monterey Downs project that becomes not really the replacement for what a speaker said about the entire lost city of Fort Ord, but really is more like a gated community of tourism, a gated tourist community, with people who will be, in effect, in an enclave who do not necessarily filter into the peninsula. And do they provide jobs to Marina and Seaside? If I'm not the voice of authority on this, consult the July 2011 presentation to FORA, in which the developer describes that high-paying jobs will come in with the people in the horse park, the horse experts, the business experts, and so on. The low-paying jobs will be recruited from the Salinas Valley. Nothing wrong with that, but be aware of what the economic dynamics will be. So keep those things in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next speaker.
Hi. Excuse me. Hi, I'm Susie Wester, and I live here on Fort Ord. I just want to echo some things and make maybe two new points. Trails and open space can support jobs. There's a tremendous amount of economic potential with recreation that really hasn't been thought about directly in the FORA plan, and yet that is what people come to the peninsula for. Besides agriculture, tourism is our major economic indicator in the area. So there's clearly, the reason people come here is it's beautiful. It's not overgrown with buildings. It's beautiful here. Second thing about that is that this is a chance to realign with the new national monument to protect the area surrounding the monument and build out the entrance to Fort Ord in a way that allows people who are coming here get off the freeway and do things that are related to coming out to the national monument. Just like you do when you go to any other national monument, you go in, you get a sandwich, you buy stuff for your mountain bike, and you go in and you ride, and you come out and you have a beer and a pizza when you get out. It's a great way to have economic potential, but that hasn't really been forwarded as part of the plan. The other thing is CSUMB students, unlike the last speaker, if anyone was at Marina Target in the last week, you know how many hundreds and hundreds of parents were there buying all this stuff for all their apartment buildings? The place was packed. So CSUMB has 5,000 students now. They are now having an economic impact on the city of Marina and the city of Seaside. And they need to be recognized because we're going to have more, and we would like to have places to shop. Second thing, I think this, after talking to lots of people who don't really participate in these things, they think that what FORA is for is to get rid of the already developed lands on Fort Ord and turn them into something. And when I tell them, you know what, the new plan for FORA isn't really to do anything else with the blighted lands of Fort Ord. They say, what's FORA? It's the Fort Ord reuse. Aren't they reusing Fort Ord? I said, no, they're planning to build into the open space. They go, really? But isn't that what FORA means? people don't realize it. And when we actually tell them, if the new plan doesn't really focus on getting rid of the blighted lands and helping the cities of Marina and Seaside to actually fulfill that because they don't have enough money to do it themselves, then I think that you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be really upset, and you'll see even more letters in the paper. Finally, with that being said, the veterans and fallen soldiers who served here at Fort Ord deserve to be remembered. And many of the places where they trained out in the backcountry have been all taken down. There's all this old history out there, and it's just getting taken out. And these could be places that could be saved as historical pieces. We could have historical exhibits and explain what happened here at Fort Ord. But there hasn't really been any effort to save that history. That history's mostly been demolished. And I've been here for 16 years, 17 years, so I've seen a lot of that history disappear. And that should be part of this plan, is how do we protect that history? There's so much emphasis on the veterans, many of them who weren't even veterans at Fort Ord, and and not for the people who served here. There's tons of people who served here, many who never came back, and these need to be acknowledged as well.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the FORA board. My name is Jody Hansen. I'm the president and CEO of the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, representing nearly 800 businesses and nonprofit associations. And I'm here tonight basically to address the economic loss that FORA's promise was to replace the economic engine that was once here. And I think that's where we've made slower progress than we anticipated, and any real big change of this plan is going to cost us a lot. It's going to cost us, it's going to set us back. And I think we really need to preserve the plan as it was originally conceived as much as possible, update it in some areas. It needs some fine-tuning, obviously, because a lot has changed in the last 15 years, but a lot hasn't. And I really think that what we're looking at is, our preservations of lands for commercial use is primary to the actual recovery of this area. It's what's going to help fund the cleanup. And we have a big job to do, and I think it costs a lot more than we ever thought it would. And the longer we wait to do the cleanup, the more it's going to cost. I would say that when we do make decisions for land use, when we stop a Whispering Oaks project, where I know that there was a business planning to relocate there, basically it was not a tourism business, it was a light manufacturing business with 50 employees, high-paying employees. They had engineers, they had machinists, they had a different kind of job than we can draw here at most times. And that opportunity was lost. So let's not lose any further opportunities. I think it's really important to stick to the plan. And it really was a well-conceived, thoughtful plan that was fully vetted. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Next speaker. If there are anybody else that's intending to speak, the on-deck rule is still in place. So please take a seat in the front here so we can move forward quickly. Welcome, Tim.
Good evening, board and members of the board. Is that better? My name is Tim Sanders, and I live in the unincorporated portion of Monterey County, and I'd like to say a little bit about the formulaic approach to the FORA development fee schedule, which was reported in the Herald yesterday. I strongly oppose the 37% decrease in developer fees that's implicit in this formula. This is a transfer of development costs, including critical supporting infrastructure, to the public treasury from developers. This kind of shift of costs to developers, or to the county, from developers, I shouldn't say just the county, but to all the agencies that may be involved in infrastructure and other things that the development fees are to support, that this is thoroughly unjustified and it's irresponsible. There's excess in addition. The problem is infrastructure.
there's already excess available commercial space that's either vacant or is undeveloped and approved. The same is true of housing. There are more, there's a larger inventory of undeveloped but approved housing. The population growth that was proposed for FORA has not been realized. It was 1% per year. It's been 15 years, so that's about 16% that should have occurred but has not. The real problems that when one sees very quickly upon development are the excess traffic on Highway 1 and Highway 156, which are already overloaded. And if there's to be further development that would require greater traffic or greater support for traffic in new roads, that should be not paid for by only the county people and taxpayers, but it should be paid for by the developers. Any addition, any new impact should be paid by developers. The current circumstances of the FORA territory should be taken into account in planning for new development. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next speaker.
Hi there, I'm Dawn Nakanishi. Small little point and this great big issue. For those of you that want the trees saved, the little critters.
Ma'am, just speak so we can hear you.
For all of those of you who want to make sure every tree is saved and the living critters are not destroyed because our veterans aren't worth that, I want to ask all of you that find this so important is your home. Was a tree destroyed? Were 10 trees destroyed? Were little rodents murdered? Were little spiders stomped on for your home? And where you shop and eat your meals and get your petroleum for your car, all those buildings that you utilize and where you go, were little animals and trees destroyed for those things that you use? Use your brains. Let our veterans be laid to rest where they were given the place to rest. Fight your battles on everything else. To be honest, I don't really care. I care about the veterans. Let some critters and trees die like they did for your home that you live on and the place you live on right now. Think about it.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Nina Beatty. I'm a 50-year resident of Monterey. I'll differ with the previous speaker. When I opened my newspaper this weekend and saw the clear cutting that was envisioned by FORA, I was appalled. And I have a letter that anyone who's interested in signing that I'll be sending to Governor Brown asking that he veto legislation to extend the FORA reuse authority. We have empty commercial space, as a previous speaker noted. It's obvious to anyone who goes through the cities in this county. We have a cemetery that had been typical federal government, had already run into lots of roadblocks at the federal and state level, which appalls me. It's really nice to do the flag waving that our government, our elected officials do. And when it comes to the real stuff, they bail on so many issues, as they bailed when they took the hospital out of Fort Ord, so that our veterans have to go out of town. So I'm very much in favor of a cemetery, an appropriate place. As the previous speaker said, there were 4 or 5 locations that were turned down. I do not think it's a veterans versus environment thing. Development is a panacea and not the answer when we have so many things going on, so much emptiness in our county that needs to be addressed. And it has to be an overall plan. plunking X store or Y business is not going to guarantee jobs for anything. It's just plunking them there. Finally, I agree with the speaker that spoke at the beginning, Susan. Voices that are missing in the comments would be the wild creatures that some people have disparaged when they've come up here. I take it very seriously, my obligation on the land, in the house I live in the city I live in, to walk carefully, to be aware that I am just one species. I don't think of myself, and most indigenous people, the native people in this land, that are not really taken into consideration in the land use policies of FORA, considered that we are not the pinnacle or the most important, but just one being. That doesn't denigrate the contributions of the human people that we share a species with. But I am very concerned that we continue on the same road we've always continued on, with a regard for ourselves in one way and the regard for the natural world in another. And as I said with the zip line, at a hearing for the zip line in Jack's Peak, where the county was worried about underuse of a park by the public, I said, who's the public? The public includes every living thing. And that park is very well used by the public. It's just not the human creatures.
Thank you, Nina. Next speaker.
Arthur McLaughlin. When I, in the mid-'60s, attended a joint meeting of a school board and a major city council representing the interest of teachers, the mayor first called for everyone to put their weapons on the table before discussions could continue. There was such conflict. In the formative days of FORA, when we met out at the blighted building near the freeway on-ramp, I was reminded of that city meeting because of the disparity of views and the way things were not progressing. There has been development within the FORA structure. You are civil to each other, although there are divergent views on the panel, because you've learned to come together and at least discuss the issues. Tonight, we've heard many divergent views from the citizenry. So as we go forward, I would suggest, did we lose power? I can talk loud. As we go forward, I would...
You got to push the button at the bottom.
Got it. As we go forward in the process, I would recommend, since you have the names of tonight's speakers and all of us who submitted comments, you have how to get in touch with us, that we form various committees on some of these issues, bringing divergent people together with a facilitation to plan and make recommendations to this board on how to proceed, bringing us all closer together. And we too can leave the pistols at home.
Thank you, Arthur. Next speaker.
Is it working? Good. My name is Luana Conley. I'm a Marina resident. And I'm glad I stepped up behind my friend Art because it was apparent at the 5 public meetings that were held earlier where we were supposed to have an opportunity for the public to discuss the reassessment. Many people left feeling like those meetings were just a joke, because every single one of those meetings was started out with over an hour, well over an hour of the meeting was just a presentation. I went to 4 of them myself. And there was very, very little time left for the public to make any kind of comments. And I know you've probably gotten lots of written comments, but I think there's a lot of unmet needs out there of the public that haven't been come out yet. As the awareness grows, especially with episodes like the bulldozing coming down the pike, if we don't take action immediately, I think that's raising the awareness of what we stand to lose. I would like to support, I don't believe that this meeting here tonight is any substitute for the kind of public forums and commissions and committees that Art was talking about. I think that's really necessary. This is about 20 years into this old plan. It's out of date. Economically, it's out of date. Population-wise, we have a new awareness of our environment, what that means to us, and what that can mean to us economically. And we're still sitting with the blight that was created by FORA. The blight was not left here by the Army. They left us 6,000 homes. 4,000 of those homes had new solar on them, and they were scheduled and slated and discussed and talked about to be sold at about $100,000 to $120,000 apiece. Instead, they were just left to rot. And now we are sitting here talking about cutting down forests so we can build homes when you all let them sit and rot. So that's just a really crazy economy. We really need to have a true reassessment of the plan and really discuss this openly in the public. There's a lot, as you saw earlier, it only took us 3 weeks to get 18,000 signatures to stop the bulldozing of just one tiny parcel. I have here over 1,000 signatures of people that visit the peninsula with disposable income. And we collected these in a couple of days. And believe me, there's thousands more people behind these 1,000. And there's thousands of local people that do not want to be cutting down oak forests while we have all this blight remaining. That's really crazy economy. We need to make the most of what we have. The way CSUMB set a great example of turning barracks into dorms. Let's try to follow that example and leave a beautiful legacy. And I agree with the previous speaker that I think we should flip roles here, that this board as it's constructed is not working. And I wanted to say that what you all just voted on tonight, thank you, what you all just voted on tonight is the kind of thing that propelled Bruce Delgado into the mayor position in Marina, making just another sweetheart deal for developers at public expense. And we're just about done with standing for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Luana. Next speaker. Okay, if there's anybody else intending to speak, please make your way to the front.
Good evening. Frank Lambert, Marina resident. I'm not here to condemn or criticize you people on FORA, but after almost 20 years now of Fort Ord being closed, I think somebody dropped the ball somewhere along the line. Now, I'm a retired truck driver. I put 8 years in the Army, so I don't want to hear anything about the military and cemeteries and everything else. But I used to deliver, when I was still working, at the former Oakland and Army and Navy base. And you want to see the good use of all those buildings and hangars that they made civilian light industry use of. I thought once Fort Ord was shut down in the 90s, we would do the same thing down here. It hasn't been. I don't know why. Maybe you can give me the answer and give everyone else the answer. Now, I'm for saving the trees and everything else. I like the lizards, the snakes, everything. Rabbits, everything. I'm an animal rights guy. This racetrack, this is what I want to talk about right now, my time. They're closing racetracks. They're closing satellite centers all around the country because people don't have the money to gamble. And that's what it is. It's a gambling facility. They just stopped harness racing in the state of California up in Cal Expo. I have friends of mine and some distant relatives that own racehorses and work in that particular industry. So I know is what I'm talking about. You're going to build a racetrack here, supposedly, Monterey Downs or whatever you want to call it. What happens when you don't have the attendance? You have all that maintenance. We have a water problem on the peninsula, which everyone in this room knows about. What are you going to do? Make a flea market out of it when you don't have the attendance to gamble? People from all over the world, as you all know, everyone in this room knows, come here, comes to this area. They want to go to the aquarium. They want to go to Cannery Row, Big Sur, Pebble Beach, in all parts north and south of here. they're not going to come and gamble their vacation money. Now, there's a few people, well, maybe more than a few people, are going to make some big money if this deal goes through. But you're going to have more traffic, more air pollution, more water problems, and possibly more crime if it goes through. I'm hoping you vote no on this and rescind whatever kind of deals or agreements were made already. This is a pristine area. Thank God we got the water on one side so we don't have more developers. And as far as housing on this, the new housing development, how many years now is the Marina Heights infrastructure sitting there, growing weeds? All the utilities are put in already. The economy is not getting any better. Regardless of who's going to win the election, we're losing more and more jobs, but building a racetrack for gambling is not the kind of jobs we need. We need light industry on that space where all those buildings, and even the ones around here, are just dormant, sitting there. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Next speaker.
I am Jan Schreiner, also a resident of Marina, and I wanted to clarify real quick for those of you who want to join us in Marina for the Marina Equestrian Center's Welcome to the Mission Riders to please RSVP to muledaze@yahoo.com, and that's mule, M-U-L-E, daze, D-A-Z-E. I want to just mention, since people are giving a bit of their backgrounds, that I have 5 ancestors who fought in the American Revolutionary War. I have uncles who were Air Force and Marines. I have a father who was regular Army, deployed through Fort Ord to Korea, decorated for valor. So yes, I am also known as a granola crunching tree hugger, but my family has a long history with the military. And according to the late, great Howard Zinn, that means we are a poor family. We are a proud family, in my opinion, but we were and always have been a poor family. We are resourceful and we are proud. Now, one of the things that the 1997 base reuse plan is premised on is forecasted increases in population. The build-out of the reuse plan, as written in the next 10 years, is worthless. I want everybody to think about how entitlements and water allocations are not equivalent to the creation of jobs, as we have seen with the approvals of over 6,000 homes since 2003. You have to imagine them because they are still not built. There are still no jobs with those, and sometimes I have to imagine how the Marina City staff can say with a straight face still, after 10 years, the theater is imminent. So, we have a national monument, and this requires an update to the reuse plan. We could think about, instead of how our business community has been solely focused on real estate and investment of land sales, 10 years ago, these authors included the trails of the former Fort Ord. Now, the business community of Monterey has created this awesome map to help people understand all the features of Monterey. And although in Fort Ord we have nationally recognized bicyclists, we have volunteers creating maps. We have government agencies posting maps. We need to get our business community behind the economic driver of a national monument. And we need to promote ourselves as a region of health that a nation can look to. At REI, I'm told sometimes they have tourist booths. We don't have that yet at REI and Marina. FORA could help.
Thank you, Jan. Next speaker.
Good evening. Leonard Laub, 30-year resident of Monterey. Folks, we have an amazing opportunity here. You are the stewards of this land. As the stewards of this land, have an obligation to help preserve it, help protect it. Once you eliminate the natural beauty, the trees, you can't replace it. I am an eco-tourist. I spend tens of thousands of dollars to travel around the world to do ecotourism. You can't hear me this way?
We're fine.
All right.
We'd like you to be on record.
There we go. I spend tens of thousands of dollars. I paid my dues too. I use this property. There are thousands of people out there like me who will pay top dollar to come here as ecotourists, as you will, to use the property in its current state. The old adage, build it and they will come, doesn't work here. Keep it, improve it, and people will come. It will be a travesty to lose this magnificent jewel. I am convinced that working with the community to balance the economic growth, the veteran cemetery, and the ecological aspects of this magnificent property is paramount. Clear-cutting huge swaths of trees is not the answer. Things have changed drastically since FORA was first established. It is time to recognize this and amend the plans to better address the needs, desires, and current economic conditions to create a vision that everyone can embrace. Get the community involved. Work with us. Don't polarize us. Let's show the world what we can really do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Next speaker. Are there others wishing to speak?
Margaret Davis with Friends of the Forward Warhorse. The course FORA has followed has come to a dead end. For years, FORA has been on autopilot, just a bureaucracy that rumbles along with the other bureaucracies. FORA has neglected to keep alive the vision of the base reuse plan and the watchdog role you were intended to have. FORA ignored the veterans for years, finally forcing them to get in bed with hardcore gambling as a last resort. Gambling destroys families. Gambling does not uphold the values our veterans fought and died for. Focus on the Family describes the kind of gambling represented by the developer as planned for Monterey Downs as addictive as crack cocaine. Veterans deserve better than to be dragged into this. FORA focused on housing that never happened and ignored the most economically promising aspect of the base reuse plan, the economic engine of outdoor tourism, which is a $60 billion plus a year industry and growing. The base reuse plan mandates a trail system that's, quote, beautiful, humane, desirable, lures tourists and homeowners to Marina, Seaside, and the peninsula. Your continuing neglect of the mandated beach to BLM corridor and these trails robs especially Marina of its most promising asset, and all the more because Marina now controls the northern access to the National Monument. Tourists will land in Marina. I'm a resident and homeowner in Marina. I want Marina to thrive. Marina's best bet for prosperity for all is building on the urban blight first and developing the beach to the National Monument corridor, mandated in Volume 1, Chapter 3 of the Base Reuse Plan, a gift from the U.S. Army to Marina and the nation.
Thank you, Margaret.
Good evening. My name is Julie Engel. There seems to be the concept that the vision for the reuse of Fort Ord is that we're going to protect 20,000 acres of BLM land now, National Monument land, and scorched earth policy everywhere else. That certainly is not the integrated vision that I understood in the Fort Ord reuse plan. One of the key policies that has not been adopted by the city of Seaside, Marina, or the county of Monterey is a policy that requires a program for oak woodlands protection that will protect stands, vast stands of oak woodlands, and connect them with a trail system and connect them as a corridor to the internal lands of Fort Ord. So the vision of, this dichotomous Fort Ord where you have development one place and nature someplace else simply is not the case. The other thing I would like to remind the FORA board of is that we have been provided an opportunity with this new economic study for a reality check. A lot of people seem to think that we ought to keep doing more of the same of what hasn't worked. And this is an opportunity to take a really hard, long look at where we're going and where our assets really lie, and develop economically within the new reality. I guess that's what I'm saying. Let's get real. All the wants, dreams, whatever about, the pie in the sky development that people thought was going to happen in the 1990s hasn't happened. Doing more of the same isn't going to make it happen. And maybe what we need to do is take a much closer look at what we can really accomplish. Doing more of the same is only going to dig a deeper hole, and that really concerns me a lot. I hate seeing an unparalleled public resource wasted. I hate seeing a public resource being divvied up to whatever developers want. The idea seems to be, well, if this doesn't work, let's give away a little bit more. That's a really disturbing trend. It's not going to solve any problems. And I would urge you to look very, very carefully at the economic study that has been completed and make the changes that we really need to see happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Next speaker.
My name's Rick Schaefer, and tonight I thought we were going to discuss the reassessment of your reassessment of the report. And tonight I didn't really hear anybody speaking about what was in the report and the different changes that have been suggested. So I'm getting the feeling that nobody out here is really going to have an idea of what's in that report. They're going over some really good ideas that have been going around and around, but they aren't addressing what you have in your report for the reassessment. So, and then I noticed that the comment periods are going to be ending on the 4th of September. Now, if people at this time aren't sure what's in that report, how are they going to have time to find out and give a comment by September 4th? So I think that your window is very short and should be lengthened to include a longer time, and that you're not appropriately addressing and giving them a chance to tell you what needs to be addressed. One of the other things is the National Monument has changed the ball game. And the development on the west side, the development areas on the west side of the National Monument is going to curtail the utilization of that area. Right now, I can't understand why there's not a sign on Light Fighter Drive that says Fort Ord National Monument this way. If you started to consider that, you might be able to find that the engine there for your economic development would exist. Around here, I see a lot of blight. In fact, around here, I see railroad tracks with no trains that could be utilized as a public service and a public transit. But right now, I have a feeling they're being utilized to railroad the public.
Thank you. Again, no applause, just thumbs up or thumbs down. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Taylor. I reside in the Crowley-Terre area in the country, just on the other side of this beautiful open space. I'd like to point out that I support the ongoing efforts of the legislature's new legislation to extend this FORA effort for the next 6 years, but I strongly encourage you to wrap this up as rapidly as possible. You've spent 20 years so far. You've got a good plan. There's everything that everybody's concerned about here tonight is in this plan. There's lots of open space. Open space needs trails developed. in that open space. What builds those trails is the development fees, ladies and gentlemen. We can't keep relying on the taxpayers of the United States to keep paying through the federal government to build more trails, to develop more open space, develop more parklands, without us doing something, without us willing to do something as a community. We as a community have to take responsibility for ourselves. This plan that FORA has come up with is build out for the rest of our lives, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. No more build out. We hit open space. Done. Build out goes to Salinas Valley. It's definitely not going to go to Carmel Valley. It's not going to go to Big Sur. Where are your grandkids going to continue to grow up in? I want my grandkids to grow up in this area. I'd like my grandkids to have a viable economic future. Open space brings a lot of economic future, granted, but we need to develop the infrastructure to make it available. I am a supporter of the horse park and of Monterey Downs. Strike me dead. I am a supporter of Monterey Downs. And the reason I am, ladies and gentlemen, is because the horse park was not economically viable. I was part of the horse park for a short time, and I'm still a very strong supporter of the horse park portion. You know, there's two different portions, and that horse park is not economically viable. Monterey Downs comes in and helps support that, and they help grant them. They do all the land use. They do all the work, the expensive work. The Veterans Cemetery is not economical without the housing element. Monterey Downs comes in and provides that housing element. It's not the most desirable thing, I understand. It is on some virgin forest area, but this is an area that's been planned. It was Monterey County. It's Seaside's property, and I believe FORA should annex this to Seaside as rapidly as possible and put this in the hands of Seaside to deal with. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jeff. Next speaker.
Bill Weigel, Seaside. I just want to correct something. I keep hearing that we have to build trails out there. Anybody who's familiar with that area knows there's an incredible trail system already there. We don't need more trails. We just need access to those trails. And the other thing it really concerns me is it's obvious to me from hearing people speak that they haven't seen the land. I think they need to go out and visit this land. Now, I realize since you've made half the trails, well, you've made all the trails in the 3,500 acres unavailable. However, as I understand, the trails have been deemed safe. That's obvious because nobody's been blown up and the trails have been used for years. I would encourage you to go back and open those trails. And I know you have this liability issue. Some people have right of entry, and they pay insurance. FORA you got this $93 million. Why don't you buy the insurance for the public? So, but the main thing I would say is the trails are there, and too many people don't know what's out there. That's why they're so eager to develop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Eric Peterson, and I'm representing Pedali Alpini, one of the oldest and most successful bicycle clubs in the United States. I agree with very much with what the previous speakers have said about this, so I won't repeat too much. Don't agree with Jeff, but that's okay. The economic value of Fort Ord National Monument is simply tremendous. Last month, I spent 4 days at Lassen National Park. There's people that went hundreds and thousands of miles to get there for recreation, and there's a lot of money in the few communities that are around there because of that. Fort Ord is far more accessible, and if nothing else, has far better trails. If we don't blow it, we can make a ton of money regionally on this. However, if we do things like putting in massive horse parks and other things like that, we will blow it. And that'll reduce the economic value. This may be a shift in what some people want the jobs to be, but there are a lot of jobs in national parks, national monuments, places like that. Just a note about the Veterans Cemetery. I don't plan on being in this Veterans Cemetery myself, but we desperately need a Veterans Cemetery. But is this the right location? if nothing else, the primary access is through a residential area, and that's not very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Next speaker.
George Riley. George Riley. I wasn't going to speak, but a couple comments, or a number of comments bothered me. First of all, if you're going to reassess, the word means something more than renew or modify. Reassess means rethinking. Reassess means reevaluate. And I'm more and more concerned that the direction that was established in the late 90s, the go-go 90s, leading up to the dot-com era, there were enormous positive outlooks about where the economy was going, for building, for population growth, for the attraction of this area, the financing, you name it. It was the go-go 90s. 15 years later, we're not there anymore. And nobody is predicting we're going to go back. Nobody. So you got economic growth that's slow. You got demographic projections that are way over the top. The electorate has changed. The awareness of the value of the economic values that we have are better understood. The financing around all projects are changed. The whole concept of sustainability is getting traction everywhere. There are great interest in being outdoors, being healthy, being fit, and there are lots of new economies growing around those industries. It's not just trails, not just economics, but it's good health, activity, fitness, and so on, long life. All those play into, I think, the future of what FORA could be dealing with. And somebody earlier said whether we need to make a big tweak or a little tweak in the plan is totally wrong, I think. Tweaking is not the issue. Rethinking is. I think you're being asked to consider doing something that's probably the most difficult things for public officials and policy officials to do, and that's a paradigm shift. How do you change from what you have been depending on and counting on and basing most of your career on? How do you change the values that you bring forward? How do you change the priority or the sense of priorities that you bring forward? And this is the opportunity. The time is now. This is the property. This is the area. People aren't coming to this area. Where are all the developers? If you're so interested in developing, where are they? You're dealing with the only ones that show up. And they're looking for a deal. And they're looking for a deal for what their interests are, not what our interests are. And to the extent that there's a community of interest here that's broader than where the reuse plan has been going, that interest is broader than where the reuse plan has been going. If there's not a major shift in priorities, if not a major willingness to take the reality that you know exists, there were mistakes made, there were priorities established, using virgin land versus getting rid of the blight. They were bad decisions, bad priorities, and now we're stuck with that. We're stuck with not only the desperate nature that I think FORA is facing in terms of the future and its own financing. You're building incentives that fight the very thing you're trying, that at least the public is interested in. Lowering development fees puts more burden on the public. People say the public can't rescue this. You think the developers can, and without a paradigm shift, we're not going to go anywhere.
Thank you, George. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Safwat Malik. I'm an architect, and I live in Monterey County. I was very impressed by our newcomer to our community, Eduardo Ocha, I believe I read his name correctly. He is the interim president of CSUMB. And in the opinion page back on Monday the 27th, he had a very interesting article inviting the community to think about Fort Ord. And one of the impressive paragraphs in his editorial is, he says, we cannot afford to make decisions regarding future uses of the former Fort Ord based solely on short-term economic gains. That may be close enough, greater long run, that may close off greater long-run opportunities. This really is a very, very succinct sentence, that we all need to pay attention to. And the other thing that I have been noticing, unfortunately, it got dark out here. I was going to invite to open these shades so that you look. FORA is, for the past 20 years, had been living in amongst blight, amongst barracks that are falling apart. I had the opportunity about a year ago to come to FORA's office to check on something, and I was really appalled to see that FORA is occupying one of these buildings. What is that about? And then we're looking at opening virgin land to develop. What about all that stuff that is here? Why don't we get rid of this nightmare that is all around us before we look somewhere else? Thank you.
Thank you, Safwat. Next speaker.
Gail Morton, Fort Ord Rec users. And first I want to just make a couple of points. The Veteran Cemetery does need to happen. And in progressing whichever way it progresses at FORA, at the former Fort Ord, it has to be a balance between open space and smart economic development. I think the entire community can agree on those points. But the plan that was put into place has failed. The economic recovery that that plan was dedicated to achieve was to happen by 2014, and that's why FORA was set to sunset in 2014. To continue to follow a plan that did not get realized in the last 15 years seems ludicrous at this point. You, the board, hired experts to analyze that plan, to analyze the current events, the current economic conditions, and the current trends in our community. And in that scoping report, they're telling you that the basic premises of your plan are no longer viable, they have not been realized, and there are changes. So to follow a plan, what your scoping report writers, EMC, said, if you're going to follow along this path, you're not going to even achieve what you set out to achieve 15 years ago until another 20 to 40 years down the road. That is a long time away for this community to recover. EMC scoping report needs to be read by every one of you who gets to vote. And I'm sorry tonight that there are so many empty chairs, because I know a lot of those empty chairs have a vote. The public, we've read that report. Yes, on August 10th, there was the statement that it's thousands of pages, it's complicated, it's comprehensive. The report itself is not that long, and I ask each of you as our representatives to read it, to understand it, to ask questions of your experts so that you know what it is saying and how it is directed. That is the most important thing that you can do for us before you make any decisions. The other thing that I want to say is the basic premises, the population growth did not occur, the demand for commercial and housing did not occur. We have a downturn in the economics that was unforeseen. Those are material changes that affect this plan. They cannot be ignored, and they are documented in your scoping report. Another material change is the National Monument. Recreation, 2010, even after the decline in our economy, is credited with $646 billion of revenue across the United States. Thank you, Supervisor Parker, for sharing that at the Board of Supervisors. There is a tremendous amount of money to be made from open space ecotourism. We need to capitalize on that, and we need to focus on that as we recapture other economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Next speaker, and as Mr. Cheshire moves forward, if there's anybody that wants to precede him, please come forward.
Ron Cheshire. I'd like to thank FORA for the process that we went through. As with this evening, we had 5 nice gripe sessions, and it was just people arguing back and forth in regards to what was taking place. FORA has been about as useful as they could be. You have had to combat economic situations. You have had to combat the public. You have had to combat one of our newest industries in the area, the environmental no-growth attorneys who are flourishing well and just making quite a few dollars here. I'm a veteran of this thing since 1991. Yeah, FORA, recreate the economic engine in this area, provide for the environment, education, economic development. That was the vision. Visions in planning usually don't change. What changes is how you attain that vision. I'm almost 61 years old. I've seen several ups and downs economically in my lifetime. I'm sure I may see a few more. Just because something goes up or down doesn't mean you change your vision. It may mean you have to look at a way to make your vision happen in a different way. We've heard a lot of talk this evening about the National Monument. It's well received, and we encourage it. One of our questions was just exactly, can anyone figure out how much economic worth it will bring to this area? Because we lost about $500 million to $750 million when Fort Ord closed, and that might equate to about $1 billion or $1.5 billion now. So we've got a lot of room to improve. We have to do as a community what we have to do. But what we cannot continue to do is argue with one another. And as we've heard this evening in such a nice, sweet voice, if you don't do it our way, we'll litigate. That has to stop here. I want to make one last statement clear. I said something at a meeting the other day in regards to the environment. A lot of this area used to look just like Armstrong Ranch. But you know what? The environment and the ecosystems were destroyed. It has rows of eucalyptus trees. It has rows of pine trees, which die when they're not watered. And it has a lot of rows of just other types of trees, like cypress, that were not indigenous specifically to here, but were planted and destroyed the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Levon, you've already spoken.
I just have one more thing to say. Well,
you
there's
got
a
about-
couple of people that spoke more than once.
No, that's not
so
true.
I
I've
should
kept
be
track
able
of
to do
everybody's
that
name
too.
here. You've spoken once.
What
I'll
I
give you
want to say
2 seconds.
is that I thank those people that are thinking about the people who were living here, the local folks, at the time that this tragedy happened in our community. And what I want to remind you of is that the fact that the plan was for those people, was for that community. And now we're turned it upside down. And people should be working with us, working with those people who were impacted, working with those people who put the plan together, not trying to include us after the fact of years and years and years of not even working with us in the community.
Thank
These
you,
things
Levon.
need to go back to
That's
where it was before.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Okay, before I go to Michael to synopsis what the next steps and the next pieces of the process are, I want to thank you all for coming. We had 45 speakers. It ran just slightly over 2 hours. You stayed within the time constraints. You were professional. Certainly there's a diversity of opinions in this room, but I really appreciate the professionalism that was here tonight, and I'm confident we can continue that, but with this many different opinions, this many public speakers to get through in this timeline is a very rare experience, and I greatly appreciate it. I know my colleagues do too. So, Michael, if you could just outline the next steps.
Yes, I just to remind everyone the deadline for getting written comments, and if they want them to be included in the report that's presented to the FORA board on the 14th of September, the deadline date is September 4th. And I know that's already been in all the advertisements that you've seen in the newspapers, and several speakers talked about it tonight. Finally, once all of those comments are in, this is on the scoping report, the consultants will take all of those together, use those in the reassessment report preparation, which will take about 2 months. And during the month of October, the reassessment report will be provided in draft for folks to review. First presented at the FORA board for board review on the 12th, and then the following week, a public document will be provided. Following that, the board will take actions with respect to the final reassessment report, either in November or December.
Okay, before we leave, this is a workshop, so obviously there's no formal action to be taken by the board, but if there's any board members who wanted to make a comment under items from members, certainly welcome to. Otherwise, again, I truly want to thank you guys for taking the time tonight. It's almost 9, and we've been here since 5:30, so thank you all very much. Felix?
Point of privilege, if I could, please. I'm quite disappointed with the fact that we took action on an item that we had previously continued, and I took some moments to read the master resolution, and it indicates that we're governed by Robert's Rules of Order. And I actually voted with the affirmative side on the previous motion. And I'd like you all to consider rehearing that previous motion. We have a board member who asked to put some comments into the record. This agency is tremendously under fire, in many regards not rightly so, but I think we're just going to perpetuate that if we don't allow one of our fellow board members adequate time to discuss an issue. That's in fact why I voted against it the last time 2 weeks ago, so that Jane would have an opportunity this evening to, fully air her concerns. So I'd like your consideration for rehearing. And if tonight's not the appropriate time to do that, I certainly think it would be appropriate to continue it to another meeting.
If that's a motion for reconsideration, I'll second it.
This is an inappropriate motion. Item 8A has already been heard and voted on. It was the second vote. If you want to bring it back for some sort of other discussion under some other form, that's fine, but this action's already been voted on. So with that said, this meeting's adjourned.
Point of order.
It's too late, I adjourned the meeting.
Robert Rules of Order allows for reconsideration, and it's been seconded. We should at least vote on it.
It does.